It was a bustling Saturday evening in Pasadena, California, and the Golden Fork was as lively as ever. The restaurant hummed with the sounds of clinking glasses, bursts of laughter, and waitstaff weaving expertly through the crowded dining room. Among them was Lexi, a server known not just for her efficiency, but also for her razor-sharp wit. She had built a reputation for handling the chaos of busy nights with ease and injecting her interactions with a flair of playful sarcasm. Lexi enjoyed being the center of attention, often turning her humor into a performance for nearby diners. That night, one particular customer caught her eye as he stepped inside. He was a large man with a warm demeanor, dressed in a modest button-down shirt that stretched slightly across his midsection. Despite his approachable smile, his uneasy posture suggested he felt out of place amidst the restaurant's lively crowd. Lexi watched as he scanned the room, looking for an open table. "Table for one?" the man asked politely, his voice calm and tinged with kindness, an unusual contrast to the high-energy chaos around him. The host led him to the only available spot, a corner table tucked away at the back. As he followed, Lexi noticed how carefully he moved through the tightly spaced tables, adjusting his stride to avoid brushing against chairs or other guests. Her lips curled into a subtle smirk. When he finally settled into his chair, taking extra care to adjust its position, Lexi allowed an unkind thought to form, but kept it to herself for now. By the time Lexi approached his table to take his order, her curiosity was fully piqued. "Good evening," she chirped brightly, her tone carrying a touch of amusement. "Looks like you've made yourself comfortable. It took a bit of effort, huh?" The man looked up, meeting her gaze with an expression that was impossible to read. She expected him to laugh, maybe even blush, but instead he gave her a polite smile. "It's a lovely place," he replied evenly, his tone calm and unbothered. For a moment, Lexi faltered, caught off guard by his composed response. Quickly regaining her rhythm, she jotted down his order and returned to the kitchen. Her co-worker, noticing her distracted expression, leaned over with a grin. "What did you say to that guy?" they asked, half laughing. "Just giving him a little extra service," Lexi quipped, brushing off the question with a self-satisfied smirk. As the evening wore on, Lexi couldn't help but keep an eye on the man. Every time she passed his table, she noted how his large frame made the small chair seem even more cramped. It was a detail she found amusing, and as the stress of the dinner rush mounted, her usual restraint wavered. Later, when she returned to check on him, she decided to indulge in her signature humor. "Still doing okay over here?" she asked in a syrupy sweet tone. Without waiting for his answer, she added, loud enough for other diners to hear, "You know, our chef's special tonight includes dessert. Moderation might be a good option to consider." A few nearby diners exchanged awkward glances, and a ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the tables. The man, however, remained unfazed. He met her gaze steadily, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Thank you," he replied, his voice as kind and measured as before. He then returned to his meal, cutting his steak with deliberate precision. Lexi walked away, feeling both smug and confused. She was used to eliciting strong reactions, be it a chuckle or a glare, but this man offered neither. Shrugging off the interaction, she returned to her routine, chalking up his silence to shyness. Meanwhile, some guests nearby began whispering to one another, their expressions uneasy. Even Lexi's co-workers seemed to sense something amiss. One of them approached her hesitantly. "Hey, maybe tone it down with that guy," they said softly, glancing toward his table. "I don't know, it just feels a little harsh. He hasn't said anything, you know?" Lexi waved the concern away with a dismissive laugh. "Oh, come on. It's just a joke. If he can't handle a little humor, that's his problem, not mine." But as her colleague walked away, Lexi felt a fleeting moment of doubt. She pushed it aside, confident she had done nothing wrong. At the man's table, he finished his meal with the same deliberate calmness that had marked his arrival. Taking a napkin, he wiped his hands methodically and leaned back in his chair. His gaze shifted around the room, taking in the surroundings with an air of quiet contemplation. Lexi noticed but dismissed it as an odd quirk. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. At first, Lexi paid no attention. It was common for guests to check their devices. But as she glanced back, she realized this was different. He wasn't scrolling or texting. He was making a call. His expression, though still calm, carried a sense of purpose she hadn't noticed before. The phone call lasted less than a minute, and when the man hung up, he leaned back in his chair, wearing the same serene expression that had marked his arrival. "Hey, did you see that?" one of Lexi's co-workers murmured, leaning toward her near the service station. Their voice was low but tinged with curiosity. "What's he doing? He's been way too calm, you know." After everything, Lexi shrugged, but unease began to creep in. Something about his composed demeanor unsettled her, though she masked it with her usual bravado. "Probably just calling his mom or something," she quipped, forcing a laugh. Yet deep down, a nagging feeling told her this wasn't over. And she was right. About 10 minutes after the mysterious phone call, the front door of the Golden Fork swung open with a purposeful motion. In walked Carlos, the shift manager. Normally relaxed and easygoing, Carlos now moved with unusual urgency, his expression tense. It was rare to see him at the restaurant on a Saturday night. His designated day off was practically sacred. Lexi frowned, sensing something was amiss. "Is everything okay?" one of the servers asked cautiously as Carlos passed. "I'll take care of it," Carlos muttered under his breath, barely sparing a glance. His eyes locked onto the man in the corner, and with swift determination, he made his way to the table. Lexi, who had been absent-mindedly polishing glasses at the bar, perked up. Her curiosity was piqued. "Why is Carlos here?" she whispered to a coworker. "Did someone complain?" Her colleague shrugged, equally puzzled. As Carlos reached the man's table, the two exchanged greetings like old acquaintances. They shook hands, their conversation hushed and out of earshot. However, what struck Lexi most was Carlos's demeanor. He looked nervous. Gone was his usual air of confidence. Instead, he stood stiffly, his movements deliberate, as if trying not to make a mistake in front of someone important. Lexi felt her stomach tighten. She set the glass down and tried to redirect her focus to her tables, but her attention kept drifting back to the strange interaction. Finally, Carlos turned toward the rest of the staff, clapping his hands together to get their attention. "Hey, everyone," he called out, his voice louder than usual but uncharacteristically shaky. "I need all staff to gather in the back dining area for a quick meeting. Right now." A murmur rippled through the team. Meetings during the middle of a dinner rush were unheard of, and the abruptness of the announcement sent a wave of unease through the servers and kitchen staff alike. Lexi's confidence faltered for the first time that night. She glanced at her co-workers, who looked equally perplexed. "What's this about?" she muttered to another server, who simply shrugged. The staff slowly filed into the back dining area, exchanging confused glances as they assembled. Lexi joined reluctantly, her usual smirk replaced by a tight-lipped expression. At the center of the room stood Carlos, next to the man whose calm demeanor had remained unshaken throughout the evening. "This," Carlos began, gesturing toward the man, "is Mr. Harrison." A hush fell over the room. Lexi's breath caught in her throat. The name sounded faintly familiar, but she couldn't immediately place it. Carlos continued, his tone steady but tinged with unease. "Mr. Harrison is the new owner of the Golden Fork. He's been here tonight observing the restaurant, evaluating how we operate, and getting a sense of the team." Lexi's heart sank. Her mind raced, piecing together the implications of Carlos's words. The man's quiet observation, his phone call, his unfaltering composure after her sharp comments. It all began to make sense. "Mr. Harrison stepped forward, clasping his hands in front of him as he addressed the group. His voice was calm, yet it carried an undeniable weight of authority. "Thank you, Carlos, for the introduction." He turned his attention to the staff, his gaze sweeping across the room before pausing briefly on Lexi. She felt her cheeks burn as she quickly looked down, her usual bravado now replaced with a deep sense of regret. "I purchased this restaurant," Mr. Harrison began, his tone steady, "because I believe in its potential. I believe in creating a space where guests feel welcomed, where the food and service are of the highest standard. But tonight, I witnessed something that deeply disappointed me. The room was so quiet, that the faint hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. Mr. Harrison's eyes scanned the group again, his expression calm but resolute. When I walked into this restaurant tonight, I wasn't expecting perfection. I know how demanding a busy Saturday night can be. Mistakes are part of the business, and I can accept that. But what I will not accept, what I refuse to tolerate, is disrespect. He let the word hang in the air for a moment, its weight palpable. Lexi's heart pounded. Though he hadn't mentioned her name, the implication was clear. Her co-workers glanced at her briefly, their expressions a mix of discomfort and pity. She kept her eyes fixed on the ground, her confidence now completely eroded. Mr. Harrison took a step forward, his voice softening slightly but remaining firm. "To the server who made the comment tonight," he said, his tone devoid of malice but laden with gravity, "I want you to understand something. Words have power. A joke, no matter how harmless it may seem, can cut deeper than you realize. A joke may seem harmless," Mr. Harrison continued, his tone unwavering yet heavy with emotion, "but when it targets someone's vulnerabilities, it can leave scars you can't see. And let me tell you, I've been the target of jokes like that my entire life." His words struck Lexi like a blow to the chest. Her usual bravado crumbled, replaced by a wave of shame and regret. Mr. Harrison wasn't yelling, and he didn't appear outwardly angry, but the disappointment in his voice was far more cutting than any raised tone could have been. "I'm not here to punish anyone tonight," Mr. Harrison said, his gaze resting momentarily on Lexi. "But I need every single person in this room to understand one thing. This restaurant isn't just about food. It's about the experience we create for every person who walks through that door. And that experience begins and ends with respect." Lexi's throat tightened. She wanted to say something, to apologize, to explain, to justify, but the words wouldn't come. All she could do was nod faintly, unsure if he even noticed. Mr. Harrison turned to Carlos. "Effective immediately, I want every employee to participate in additional training on customer service and workplace respect. And tonight, I expect you to have a one-on-one conversation with the waitress in question about what happened." Carlos nodded, his agreement immediate and resolute. "Of course, Mr. Harrison. I'll take care of it." The room remained silent as Mr. Harrison surveyed the staff one last time. "I hope this is the last time I ever have to address an issue like this. You're all part of this team, and I expect each of you to uphold the values this restaurant stands for." With that, he gave a curt nod and walked out of the room. The silence he left behind was almost suffocating, a thick cloud of tension and unease. Slowly, the staff began to disperse, murmuring quietly among themselves. Lexi, however, remained frozen in place. She could feel the weight of the evening pressing down on her shoulders, heavier with every passing second. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of a nearby table, trying to steady herself. Carlos approached her quietly, his expression neutral but firm. "You know we need to talk," he said, his voice low. Lexi nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Later, in the break room, she sat with her head in her hands. The muffled sounds of the bustling restaurant seemed far away, drowned out by the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. She replayed the events of the evening over and over. Mr. Harrison's calm authority, the way her co-workers had looked at her, and the weight of her own careless words. For the first time in her career, she felt a deep sense of shame. Carlos entered the room and sat across from her, placing a glass of water on the table. "Lexi," he began gently, leaning forward, "we all have moments where we let our emotions get the better of us. But tonight, you crossed a line." "I know," Lexi whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to." Carlos held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Intent doesn't erase impact," he said, his tone firm but compassionate. "I know you like to joke around, but you need to remember, you don't know what someone else is going through. That man didn't deserve your comment. No one does." Lexi nodded slowly, her chest tight with guilt. "I wasn't trying to hurt him," she admitted. I don't even know. I guess I was trying to be funny. Maybe make the night go by faster." Carlos softened, his expression less stern. I get that, but this job is about more than just serving food. It's about making people feel welcome, respected, and valued. Every single guest deserves that. No exceptions. For the first time, Lexi allowed herself to truly sit with her guilt. She thought about Mr. Harrison's words, their calm yet cutting weight, and how deeply they resonated. She had never considered the power of her words so fully before. "I need to apologize to him," she said finally, her voice trembling but resolute. "I don't know if he'll accept it, but I have to try." Carlos nodded, a small smile of approval crossing his face. "That's a good start." The next morning, Lexi arrived at the restaurant early, hoping to find Mr. Harrison before the day's service began. She spotted him sitting in a corner booth, reviewing paperwork. Her heart pounded as she approached, but she forced herself forward. "Mr. Harrison," she began, her voice shaky, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. What I said last night was uncalled for and wrong. I wasn't thinking about how it might affect you or anyone else." He set down his papers and studied her for a moment. To her surprise, his expression softened, and a small smile appeared. "Thank you for saying that, Lexi," he replied calmly. "I appreciate the apology, but what matters most is what you do moving forward. This isn't just about one moment, it's about how we treat people every day." "I understand," Lexi said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat, "and I'm going to do better." In the weeks that followed, Lexi made good on her promise. She worked on being more mindful of her words and actions, not only with customers, but also with her coworkers. The staff underwent training focused on respect and customer service, and the restaurant's atmosphere began to transform. The team felt closer, more united in their shared goal of creating a welcoming environment for every guest. For Lexi, the experience was transformative. It wasn't just about keeping her job, it was about becoming someone she could be proud of. Someone who uplifted others rather than tearing them down. The lesson was simple, but profound. You never know what someone is going through or who they truly are. A little kindness can go a long way, and thoughtless words can leave scars far deeper than you might realize. So remember this: whether at work, at home, or with strangers, choose respect. It costs nothing but can mean everything. And if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Let's keep spreading stories that remind us of the power of kindness.